I was drawn to Align because I love selling sales tech. I think it's just such a unique and special space. And I truly wish that something like Aligned was around when I was selling. Back when I was selling, it was send an email, send a proposal, hope that somebody sees it, hope that they say that they'll send it to the person that they told you they would send it to.
Everyone wants to build stronger pipeline, but only a few know how to make it happen. If you're listening to this show, you know outbound is not dead. You just need a little help building a system that actually works. Well, you're in the right place. I'm Todd Busler, and on this show, we're breaking down the plays, processes, and frameworks behind repeatable pipeline growth, straight from the people who built it. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, I'm pumped for our guest today. Meredith Chandler is currently the head of sales at Aligned. They sell in the digital sales room category. Her CEO, one of the best people to follow on all of LinkedIn. She spent time at great companies like Samsara and P Club and Captivate and Spiff, and has been around software sales for more than a decade. What I really like about Meredith is the heavy emphasis on talent development, skills and training, and exactly how she builds that culture of constantly improving within her sales teams that she builds. She's very opinionated, she's very smart and witty, and she's in the mix right now at a Series A company doing it again for the fifth or sixth time. Enjoy the episode. Meredith, what's up? How we doing?
Todd. Great. You?
I was just thinking about how I knew you, and I think we were trying to recruit you at Heap for years and couldn't ever make it happen.
That sounds about right. My loss. My loss.
Yeah. It's been fun to follow your journey. I'm excited for you to share more about your story and learnings. And, this podcast is all about trying to figure out outbound, right? And the game has changed a lot since when you and I really started. I think we're about the same age. Maybe just before we hop into some questions, a little bit about your current role, the company you're at. I think that helps set the stage for some of the context we're going to talk about today.
Yes, happy to. So I'm currently head of sales at Aligned, which is a collaborative digital sales room. And so I lead the sales org there. Before that, I've worked at multiple outbound strategy running sales orgs. And so I've made outbound strategies from zero, from the ground up. So I'm excited to share some of those tips and tricks here today.
Yeah, I feel like when I look at your background, Samsara, Spiff, Captivate, P Club, like I see very strong sales organizations, also like student of the game and P Club. So I think like you've thought deeply about a lot of this stuff. What drew you to most of the roles where the outbound motion was still being built, or like earlier stage where you're still kind of molding what that looks like?
Yeah, as you know, Todd, it's easier to make change in startups and that opposed to established companies. You can run a lot quicker. You have more freedom to be really creative, and you can also see and measure impact almost immediately. So that's why I've gone to companies like this.
Your runs, Meredith, I'm sure when you think about Spiff or Captivate, there's a lot of similarities, but Samsara or Indeed, very different. Where do you think you got the best learnings when it comes to, hey, during these handful of years, I think I matured the most because I learned X, Y, Z?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So I did start off with some formal sales training. So my first ever gig was at Yelp. And Yelp was notorious for kind of churn and burn. People were not there for longer than 1 year. 2 years, you were almost seen as an idol because they would churn and burn within 6 to 9 months. But I took that job because they had a very formalized sales training. It was 90 days. And so they took people without that sales background and they really trained you up. And so that gave me a solid foundation. And then I've gone to other orgs such as Samsara, which this is illegal now, but at the time you had to show your W-2 to even be interviewed there. So they only allowed A players. And it was incredible. It was such high stakes. That's how I know your co-founder, Steven. It was incredibly high pressure, high stakes, but you learn the most because you were surrounded by, again, the best of the best. We've all been, as hiring managers and maybe even interviewees ourselves, but we've all seen how good a salesperson can be on paper and then the reality once they're in seat. So Samsara eliminated any of that debacle from happening. And again, so from there, that's where I really learned how to kind of sharpen the axe. But then in terms of outbound, I really mastered it at P Club because it was ground zero. There was nothing in place, and P Club was a sales training platform. So we had some of the best sales minds on the platform. You have a course on there, example A, right? So you have the greatest minds teaching very specific topics. And so you could really study something in depth, which is what I did with outbound there. A typical outbound success rate is what, 20% open and 1% to 3% booking. I got us to a 76% open and a 16% booking because I was taking every single course by renowned authors on the actual messaging itself.
Talk to us about that, because there's a lot of people that hear that and go, holy shit, how are you doing that, right? In the world of, hey, there's tons of volume. What exactly were you studying? What were you doing to stand out and get to those types of results?
Yes. So I would say outbound is, I think the messaging is overlooked a lot. So people will say outbound all looks and sounds the same because they're right. A lot of the messaging, even if you follow a specific framework, will look or feel very similar. You usually open with a problem, a simple solution, how your solution solves for that, and a soft CTA. And I think that's kind of the right framework in general, but you have to be more specific. You have to be very relatable. And a lot of the messaging that I was able to create there was very specific. So at a PLG company, you have access to people that are already in your platform, right? And so if you're not at a PLG company, if you have an idea of somebody who's checking out your website, I know intent data is huge today, right? You can take that initial lead, but most people will stop there. You need to figure out where the lead sits in the rest of the ecosystem. And so, Todd, if I see you maybe poking around in some of our assets or responding to social or whatnot, I'm going to hit you up, but then I'm also going to find Steven and I'm going to say, hey, Todd is taking a look at this. Like, we're starting discussions about XYZ. Like, how do you feel about that? And so you really need to multi-thread, which we talk a lot about once you're in an active deal, but it starts way before then. You really need to multi-thread, dropping specific names, specific pain points. I used to put a lot of memes and GIFs in my messaging too. Like, it's enjoyable to open and interact with, because if you're on the receiving end of that, you're getting 20 to 30 of those per day minimum. It's delete, unsubscribe, delete, unsubscribe. Oh, here's, they're calling out somebody on my team specifically. I better open this.
Yeah, we call it swarm. It's like multi-thread. When you have deals, we call it swarming. Like, you're learning something. Sometimes this is from an AE, right? Sometimes this is an IC. Sometimes this is you bumped into someone that's around and it's, hey, I'm hearing these problems. Hey, it's swarm, right? Now there's multiple people. You can go after the account together, but we think about it very similarly. Let's hop into the aligned example. So what did the motion look like there? I know it's also PLG. I know there's a, growing brand there pretty quickly. I think you guys are dominating LinkedIn, but what did you walk into? What were the first couple things you had to change, adjust, start?
Yes, I would say aligned is very swarm-y because the product in and of itself has a ton of intent data as well. So there's just a wealth of information. And if you want to break through your prospective buyers, again, you have to make it very relatable, right? You can't just say, hey, I know that you're using our product, or hey, I saw that you checked out the product, you checked out the website. In aligned, we're able to say, I noticed that you were looking at the pricing, or I noticed that you were looking at, this proposal section, or, oh, you're looking at how to create an AI generated business case. Like, how many business cases are you pumping out a week? Or like, what's the hardest part about making a business case? Just being super specific instead of, oh, I saw you are checking out the product. Our product solves for X. How does that resonate with you? So again, being super specific, but then also when we see Our end user is salespeople, right? And so a lot of the times, most of the times, it's the salespeople going in there, signing up on the free version. So we reach out to them, but then we also reach out to the sales leader. So, hey, Todd, saw Meredith signed up for Aligned. This is now your 5th rep using the platform. Do you want to see what they're up to? Last week, they sent out 10 rooms and 20 of your buyers entered the room. You want to check it out? So it's that really pointed, defined messaging that really resonates with a buyer because there's so much noise today, right?
For sure. With that natural PLG, and I also think some natural virality, right? Because one rep sees it, another person wants to do it, a buyer pops in. Like there's a bunch of breadcrumbs and moments or, intent, whatever you want to call it with your product. Do you have to do like, hey, we're trying to break into this target account to get outbound? Or is there enough warmth within, plenty of accounts? Like, how do you approach it?
That is a very loaded question. There's a lot of different ways we can do it, right? So we prioritize signals. So again, being PG, we can see when somebody's on the website, when they're within the room, when they are within the room, and then commenting on any of our social posts if they are doing a specific action in the room versus something else. So we take all those signals and then we prioritize them and give the account a score necessarily. And then they can still move in and out of the scores, right? So maybe 5 signups gives them a score of 7 out of 10. And then in the next 2 weeks, 10 more people sign up. Now they're an 8 or 9 out of 10. So it's kind of always ebbing and flowing as the rooms cool down.
I want to go deeper on that actually, because, there's a lot of talk of signals and getting some type of insight from a lot of things that are happening across the web, social, email, etc. What did the coaching look like to get your team to do this, right? Like, were they trying to do some of this on their own when you got there, but a lot of the scoring wasn't built out, or they just didn't really know how to execute it? I'm sure you came in, you're like, whoa, hold on, let's fix this, and that thing, you're good, keep doing more of it. Like, what did you see?
Yes, we're still fixing it, and I can't take sole credit. It is a whole team effort, right? We have the BDRs who are doing most of the outreach, meeting regularly with them on their feedback of, okay, what are the most impactful plays? And then we verify it with data, right? You want to verify everything with data. So the outreach, the touches to conversion for the initial booking, then, what does it do all the way through the funnel? I think a lot of times organizations can maybe just look at the first few, how quickly does it convert to an actual qualified opportunity, but we're following it all the way through. What's actually becoming a customer of ours, and then how much are they expanding? So we double down on those signals. So a lot of that comes from feedback from the BDRs. Marketing plays a huge part in this as well. So knowing what they're planning, preparing any sort of outreach ahead of any launch. So when we have webinars or when we do playbook releases, we make new targeted outreach very specific to that. We line it up before the launch. So again, it can be very swarmy, very hot to trot. We also have our RevOps agency, which helps us, again, prioritize and segment all of these leads. I don't want to take full credit, and not trying to take full credit. It is a full team effort, but a lot of analyzing.
Can you dig a little bit deeper into that part around like the coordinated effort with marketing? Because like the RevOps and making the signals and the scoring, like sure, there's some like tech or almost product work goes into that. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out like, okay, marketing actually has a really good asset. How do I act on this? Or we're running a really good event or something big is dropping. Who owns that motion? Any advice you have for other people in your shoes on like, here's how to do that thing well?
Yes, I will say first and foremost, you want to make sure that your incentives are aligned. And so a lot of times marketing can really go after signals or signups, whereas sales were after revenue. And so just making sure that a sign up or an activity will eventually correlate to revenue in the end. And if it doesn't, you need to cut that activity and shift to something else. Now in startups, you have to be very experiment focused, right? So you have to be open to running all these crazy plays and ideas and try anything twice, but then measure it and double down on what does work and what doesn't. So it's kind of a two-sided ownership because, classic sales and marketing is going to bring the leads. Sales is always going to say, you didn't bring me enough leads. You didn't bring me the right leads. Marketing's going to our marketing is really great. Our head of marketing will even dig up leads that maybe we haven't considered on the sales side of the house. We haven't prioritized them based on our criteria. So she does her own analysis and brings those to light, and vice versa. We'll say, we haven't thought about this play. We haven't run it yet. Can we try this? And so it's really a two-way street.
I love that. Meredith, I want to dig in a little bit to how you approach sales leadership. Like, what kind of environment, what kind of organization are you trying to create? Like, I think it's always exciting as the first sales leader in an organization because you get to really build the DNA. How have you approached it? Do you have like themes or pillars or any common strategies on how you approach doing that?
Great question. So I try to create high performing sales cultures. We're all in sales for pretty much the same reason. We're very motivated. Most people are money driven or just competitive in general. And so I try to foster a high performing culture where merit and effort are rewarded. So with that, it comes with high expectations, but because of that, I try to include high rewards. So clear promotion paths, generous spiffs, career development, heavy coaching. Again, I was bred in kind of these boiler sales room environments, Yelp, Samsara. They're tough, but that's, like we said earlier, that's where you learn the fastest and the most is doing these uncomfortable things. So when we're in these uncomfortable environments, I try to at least make it okay to fail. Trying new things is okay. Failure to a degree is okay too, right? It's okay to lob over some aggressive new messaging. It's not okay to miss your number by 50% and not even try or throw your hands up and say, I'll try again next quarter.
How do you create that culture of like, I think a lot of people agree with that in terms of like, hey, I want us to take shots. I want to be comfortable being okay making mistakes because I know there's going to be some breakthroughs. How do you actually create that culture? Like, do you show them and say, look, here's why I messed up and celebrate that? Do you take examples? Like, can you go a click deeper there?
Yes. So one rule that I like to implement is I always tell the reps, if you don't know something, it's perfectly fine to say, I don't know. My job by asking you these questions is I'm not trying to interrogate you. I'm not trying to show that you don't or do know your deals. I'm trying to help you oversee gaps before the gap gets unmanageable. So again, please just be honest. If you don't know something, say you don't know it. I also over-explain or try to over-explain the why behind things, right? So classic, have you updated your CRM yet example? We're asking this because so many things stem off of the CRM, right? So you're asking me for more leads, you're asking me for more leads. The reason we need the CRM updated is because that's how marketing does their forecasting. If they see we have a ton of open pipeline, even though it's not being worked, they assume we have enough. So when we properly move things along in stages, they know what to feed us or what not to feed us. So I think over-indexing on the why really helps make up that culture.
Yeah, that very, very important for sure. I saw in a post, which we're going to get into some of your writing a little bit later, but I saw in a post, having some reps have some really good early success, 150% of quota in their first quarter. What would you point to in terms of what made that possible?
Yes, there's a few things. So hiring right, hiring top talent, and top talent also means just aligning with, for lack of a better word, aligning with company vision and values, right? So I've worked with so many founders and startups over the years through consulting that don't really know exactly what they're going for in their sales org. And so they accidentally mishire, right? They hire the reps from the huge companies, but that's not what their cycle is going to be at all. They need an outbound hunter. So I think just being really clear on the profile and the skills needed and hiring some fantastic people to begin with. That's one part. The second part is having a very clear onboarding plan. So this might be the post that you're referring to, but giving them a plan so that when they step in day one, they know what the expectations are for day 1 through 14 through 30 through 60 to 90, and they know the actions that get them there. And then
Meredith, where do people go wrong on that? Sorry, I want to dig in that. Where do people go wrong on the onboarding plans? Because you walk in any company, it's like, okay, here's your 90-day onboarding plan, but the good ones look very different from the bad ones, or the ones who actually stick to it and have a method for testing knowledge and understanding and progression. Like, where's the gap?
I think the gap is in the specifics, right? So it might sound micromanagey, but again, when I hand it to them, I will over explain, this is going to sound micromanagey, or I might seem like a helicopter mom the first 2 weeks. This is intentional because I meet with them at the end of each onboarding day. I say this is intentional because I would rather us get off to the right start than lose time having to course correct on anything later on. I also want to meet with you every day because, so again, over explaining why, I want to unblock anything for you. I don't want you waiting 3 days, 4 days, because if you're waiting 3 to 4 days, 3 to 4 times, that's 2 to 4 weeks. That's 1/3 of your quarter. And so I think, to answer your question, Todd, where people get it wrong is they think we have so much time to ramp them, but that time adds up so quickly. And so you can't really afford to lose those 3 to 4 days in between meetings because it really equates to a full month.
Hey listeners, interrupting the podcast for a quick 20 seconds for a Champify plug. If you've been getting value from our content via webinars, podcasts, stuff I write on LinkedIn, I hope you understand that we think about and take pipeline generation very seriously. If you're listening to this podcast, it means you care about figuring out outbound, figuring out how to be more creative to prospect into your top accounts and win more revenue. At Champify, what we do is turn your entire company's existing relationships into new revenue. Champify's AI finds your highest converting revenue opportunities, from former customers at new companies to previously lost deals ready for a re-engagement, and turns them into a repeatable pipeline engine at scale, all within your existing workflows and low learning curve, which means high adoption. We're generating 20% of pipeline for companies like S&P Global and working with some of the largest, fastest growing B2B orgs in the world. If you're interested in what we do, we have a compelling offer for people that are listening to this podcast. We'll go through a data test, we'll go through a closed loss audit, and we'll show you the potential pipeline opportunities you have within your existing systems. Email sales@champify.io and mention this podcast, and we'll present you with a compelling offer. Enjoy the rest of the show. I feel guilty. I interrupted. You were going to say a third thing. Do you remember it?
No, it was, great question. No, it was a good thing to tap on. But the third thing I was going to say was that contributes to a strong onboarding is continuous coaching. I think we give a lot of feedback the first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but I also think our industry in general does a huge disservice to frontline managers in that you have a super rep and you pluck them and you say, okay, Todd, go make 8 Todds. And they just expect you to have the same skills of leadership and management and people management, and they're completely different. And I was very guilty of this myself at Samsara. I still feel terrible for those reps. And even though we were performing at 180, 200%, the people management skills were not there. And so I think that takes a lot of time and intentional development alongside the regimented weekly call recordings. You can't replace, you have all this AI who can give you a recap, right? But you cannot replace the very tactical line by line coaching of even just tone correction. Like, hey, I saw what you were trying to get at here, but how do you think, it came across with that tone? So being very nitty gritty in continuous coaching, I think also helps them get off to the right start and stay performing at that level.
I love both points here. Like, I couldn't agree more. In the onboarding part, it almost feels, you said helicopter mom, but like you're better off missing on too much, right? Because the alternative is way worse, right? Of like, we're going to give them a month or her a month and we don't really know. You waste a lot of time. I couldn't agree more also on the frontline manager. I think that's like a chronic problem in most organizations. I think the really best run go-to-market teams know that and get it right and like heavily invest in that frontline manager. But in general, very, very underinvested in. You take the onboarding, learning, continuous development really seriously. And I think that's from the outsider view or only somewhat kind of friendly view with you, a big reason for this success. Like, talk to me about how you use ongoing education, self-directed plans to continue to improve at this craft.
Yes. So I have found through the years that reps will perform at a higher level when there is a higher degree of ownership involved. So you and I can make a sales plan all day long, right? Like you and I could probably you especially could do it in your sleep. But what good is that going to do if we just hand it over to them, right? They really need to be invested and they need to have those aha moments themselves, right? And so one thing I've always done with my teams is at the beginning of each quarter, we run a quarterly business review. And so here's your number, walk me through a numbers based plan on how you plan to get there. So take your average deal size, take your average deal cycle, take your conversion rates, take your booking rates, and walk me through start to finish how you need to organize. I don't care if you need to do it hour by hour of your day. Usually they don't get that granular, but some will even get on a weekly basis. But you should be able to tell the activities that you need to do, not just from an email perspective, right? But, some examples are we've seen gaps to goal in the first week, and that's a lot more powerful and a lot more empowering to catch it earlier on because you can say, oh, wow, okay, even looking at my numbers, I need to book 70 meetings. That's not going to happen. What if I triple my ACV instead? And especially when you're smaller, when your ACV is 10, 20, that's still pretty manageable. So I'm going to go after mid-market accounts. And so I'm only going to send 200 emails a week, but they're going to be super, super detailed. So that's one way. And then the other way is just continuous coaching. So blocking off time on the calendars to review those calls. I leave a ton of comments. Hoping my goal this quarter is to get to automated scorecards. Things I've done in the past is because at the leadership level, you see where everyone's strengths and areas of improvements are, pairing them up accordingly. I see Todd is a master negotiator and Steven's really good at overcoming objections. So I'm going to pair you both to listen to each other's calls because I know that you're both looking to improve on that. And that way you don't just hear my voice all the time. I don't know everything. Many of my reps are better at me in a lot of different things. I want to do what's best for the team and give them as many voices as they can. And then lastly, we'll also have a section in our quarterly business reviews of personal professional development. So each rep is naturally interested in developing their own skills, and I want to encourage that. For example, I have one rep who wants to subscribe and does now read the Wall Street Journal daily because he wants to get really good at financial CFO level conversations, whereas I have a rep who joined his local commerce club because he wants to acquire more business acumen. So again, allowing them ownership and initiative in the things that are most relative to them.
So interesting. Very top of mind. I wrote a post about this like 2 days ago. We have a CSM. She's very smart. She knows her space very well. And she said, Todd, you tend to ask a couple questions that just show you understand where they are in the business cycle or their fundraising journey. How do you do that? And, you're saying, read the Wall Street Journal. Like we've been on a learning plan together where we're like reading some S1s, listening to a specific podcast, going through together. That makes me excited because I do feel like there's some people that are a little bit more early or junior in their career that realize the importance of like just business knowledge, business EQ, and they're trying to learn that, which I think is really exciting. And I think, my flaws, I really believe that there's going to be just less reps that are higher earners. And I think it's going to be these people that are investing in their time and energy and money and things like this. So that's cool to hear.
I think you're absolutely right because it takes so long to acquire that knowledge and you really just need the repetitions, right? And I always tell reps, if it sounds foreign, just stay with it because after a while, it will start to click. So I think it's great that you're hanging out with your CSM.
100%. I know also, Meredith, you currently I feel like you're always doing some coaching, right? Whether that's with AEs or leaders or founders. Why do you do that? Do you feel like it keeps you sharp seeing other spaces? Does it really make you feel good? Any like key learnings in some of that? I'm curious to get your take.
I love coaching outside of Align because it expands my tunnel vision. I get to hear what's going on in other orgs all over the world. So I have AE clients, founding clients, leadership clients from the US, Europe, and Asia. And it's so easy and to just get really focused into our day-to-day in our company. And I remember even before LinkedIn existed, right? Getting outside of that tunnel vision was such a bigger lift, but coaching allows me to be sharper for my aligned team, but also have a better pulse on everything that's going on in the market to service my clients better, but also aligned as well.
Yeah, that's one thing I really like about selling into go-to-market. Like, you're hearing about everyone else's sales and marketing challenges, right? And you're seeing, oh, this is where other people are running into issues. Therefore, they're trying to approach this problem. It's almost like, to go back to the business knowledge, you're like getting an MBA and go to market, right? Like, you're just learning so much. I find the same way. I don't do as much coaching now, but like, it is cool to just see different flavors of problems, many of which might present themselves in your business soon too, right? So it's cool you do that to stay sharp.
To your point, it's good perspective too, right? So you might think this problem is so big, it's so monumental, and the next call you take, they're 5 steps behind you, or their problem is 10 times bigger than yours. And you're like, okay, like we're actually doing something right here. So
I couldn't agree on that. I'm guilty of it. Sometimes we're probably wired the same where you're like, all right, 6 out of 10 things are going great. I'm going to go focus on the 4 that are messed up. And then you talk to other people and you're like, oh, wow. Actually, we're a lot further along than I think most, more companies in our stage. So I couldn't agree more with that. Meredith, the last thing I want to ask you about is around the space you're in, right? Like, I think there's a lot of buzz around, deal rooms, digital sales rooms. You can tell me what we're calling this space now, but what drew you to the category? Where do you think maybe there's some misconceptions? And like, how are you guys, I'm sure you're pushing the limits of your own product. So I'd love to learn about some of the use cases there.
sure. I was drawn to Align because I love selling sales tech. I think it's just such a unique and special space. And I truly wish that something like Aligned was around when I was selling. Back when I was selling, it was send an email, send a proposal, hope that somebody sees it, hope that they say that they'll send it to the person that they told you they would send it to, work in spreadsheets for mutual action plans. So compiling that all into a collaborative workspace where you as the buyer have all that visibility, but you can also really provide a service to your buyer. It's really enjoyable for your buyer to go through this journey with you because the mutual action plans are actually mutual. They can go to exactly the bit of information that they're looking for instead of scrolling through 30 pages of back and forth via email. And so I think the biggest misconception is that digital sales rooms, or at least one like Aligned, is just a microsite. It's not a microsite. It's not a web page per se. It is really collaborative. You can tag somebody just like in Slack to exactly where you want them to go. You just keep everybody focused, very much pun intended, aligned on the journey towards partnership.
I think you and Gal are doing an amazing job also, like with the LinkedIn messaging around that, like buyer enablement, enabling your champion. Like, I talk to a lot of, I've had many really good, I think the top enablement people on this podcast, and everyone's always like, you're enabling your champion. That is what selling is becoming. And I think you guys are doing a great job of telling that story. What's the biggest challenge about selling in this category?
It's a newer category. So you have 2 challenges, right? So you're selling them on a competitive space. So you're selling them on your solution, Aligned, but you're also selling them on a newer concept, a newer idea, right? And so everybody thought, Mac was crazy when it was just fax machines. Everybody thought a computer was crazy, but now we all have computers in our pockets. So I don't think we're far along from a digital sales being the norm, and even Gartner says that it's going to be very much a norm in just another year or 2. It's going to be a necessity in your tech stack.
Last question I have for you, which I think is, I'm eager to get your take here, is One thing we see quite a bit right now, also a newer category, everyone trying to figure out relationship-based selling, sales intelligence, signal-based selling, right? One thing that's challenging for us is when we're in a like head-to-head competitive deal, it's like, great, they're going to buy something. They've narrowed on exactly what flavor to fix their problem. What's it been like for you? Do you have to compete against, obviously you're competing against do nothing, should we do this? But do you also have to compete against, look, someone has a win rate issue. There's a bunch of different flavors to tackle it. Is that common for you right now? This is something I'm personally thinking a lot about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could see how that could be perceived, and maybe this is, again, instilling that high performance culture. You should, in an ideal world, in your discovery, capture 4 to 5 pain points. So even if it's win rates and they want to anchor you to that and they come to their own conclusion of, okay, your solution or line can't solve for that, I should still have 3 to 4 backup pain problems that we are going to solve for better than anyone else.
Yeah. How much coaching goes into that? Like, I'm sure you're taking, because I've seen the reps that you've hired, some have come from completely different backgrounds. Is the selling much different, or it's just like, look, the line of questions, the product different? Or basically what I'm saying is, did it take a while to get the learning curve for someone to be able to say, hey, listen, Mr. or Mrs. VP of sales, to be able to challenge in that way?
Oh, yes. I tell all candidates in the interview process, because most candidates in our industry will say, oh, I've always wanted to sell to sales leaders. And I very candidly tell them, it is a double-edged sword. Yes, they talk your talk. You can be very direct, but at the same time, whether you're selling Aligned or any other sales tech, your sales skills are being sold at the same time. So you're really selling 2 things, your product, and especially Aligned, because we really put all that content, like you said, on LinkedIn, and we like to be seen as thought leaders providing a lot of value into the sales community. So people look to us as, sales leaders, sales thought leaders. We need our sales cycle to match that 100% of the time. And it works both ways. Sometimes when we have a real on call, a client will say, okay, this all makes sense. Like, I'm so glad you lived up to my expectations for everything I've seen. Well, we've also had the opposite happen. We have had somebody, we had an off call, we didn't set next steps. And the CRO point blank said, like, you guys claim to be the leader in the space. You missed this simple sales foundation. I'm not going to move forward.
I would say the same thing is true for us, just because we're selling a lot to salespeople, demand gen, et cetera. They're judging your execution as almost a byproduct of how your company is going to operate and what is coming. I think for you, it's probably likely even more true, right? Because of exactly what you're doing. Meredith, this has been awesome. I really admire how you've gone about building your career. I'm enjoying reading what you're writing on LinkedIn. I'm happy you're sharing a lot of your knowledge with the world. And I love the way you're just approaching building this with Gal and the rest of the team. So I'm rooting for you. I appreciate you taking some time to share. I would encourage everyone listening to follow Meredith on LinkedIn, taking a lot of time, and it shows in your writing.
Thank you so much for having me, Todd. Big Champify champ over here, rooting for you. And to your listeners, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. You can find me Meredith Chandler at Aligned, or you can follow me at merediththesalescoach.com.
Love it. Thanks, Meredith. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Cracking Outbound. If this was helpful, let us know by messaging me, Todd Busler, on LinkedIn, and share this episode with a friend that you think will be interested. If you want more resources about building and scaling all things outbound, you can sign up for our newsletter at champify.io/blog.